So you want to go to the Isle of Man? Can you spend a full week there and find enough to do? I'll share with you 17 things you will enjoy on the Isle of Man. Plus, you'll get some music from Ruth Keggin and Rachel Hare. This is Pub Songs and Stories number 290. He was an alpha male, and like a strong gale, he blew through your life without regret. Left destruction and pain, then came back again to hurt you and leave you upset. But he rushed to your side when he heard you cry like a cowboy, though he caused your distress. You ain't a lady in need, so he better take heed, or you'll destroy him in your pretty dress. By amazing grace, you don't need him. It's amazing you didn't know he was wrong. The true measure of a man is how willing he is to stand by the side of a woman who's strong. With a little bit of force, he laid out a course to show you that he was righteous. You saw through that routine, you knew he was just mean, though he tried to pretend he was pious. By amazing grace, you don't need him. It's amazing he didn't know he was wrong. The true measure of a man is how willing he is to stand by the side of a woman who's strong. Are real, especially when they feel that their actions are justified by God. You ain't looking to run, and you're my kind of dumb. You'll lay him right down in the sod. By amazing grace, you don't need him. It's amazing he didn't know he was wrong. Measure of a man is how willing he is to stand by the side of a woman who's strong. By amazing grace, you don't need him. It's amazing he didn't know he was wrong. The true measure of a man is how willing he is to stand by the side of a woman who's strong. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. 'Twas blind, but now I see. Welcome to Pub Songs and Stories. I am Marc Gunn. I'm a Celtic musician and podcaster living in Atlanta, Georgia. This podcast is primarily for fans of my music, in particular, and Celtic music in general. That's because I highlight some of the artists I feature on my other podcast, the Irish and Celtic Music Podcast. But today we're doing a little bit of traveling
to the Isle of Man. I went to the Isle of Man this summer as part of my Celtic Invasion Vacations. I learned a lot about the island, about its Celtic and Norse history, and I came up with a list of 17 things you can do on your own trip to this delightful Celtic nation. If you're new to the show, please subscribe. You can do that at pubsong.com, over on Patreon, or you can send me an email at follow@celtfather.net. And of course, if you know someone who might be interested in visiting the Isle of Man or another Celtic nation that's not as well commonly known, please share this episode. Before we get started, I have some shows coming up. IrishFest Atlanta is this weekend. I am performing on November 9th in the morning with my daughter Inara. I think it's like 10 or 11 a.m. But I will be on stage with my Inara, and she's taking the lead for this show, and I'm really excited about it. She's been practicing really hard and just sounds fantastic. She's blossoming this past fall. We've been getting voice lessons and just practicing a lot. And we went to Multiverse a few weeks back, which is another convention here in Atlanta. And she came with me for 2 days, and we spent those days singing our hearts out, and it was amazing. So I'm looking forward to this show. She's also going to be singing with me at CONjuration, although I will be doing a lot of solo shows there as well. I'm also at the Georgia Renaissance Festival Fall Fling on November 23rd and 30th, so if you can make that, please come join me. It's been a while since I've published an episode of this podcast, so there's a lot that has happened in the past few months. Most of it you can find through blogs over on Patreon, so that would be the step one. Go to my Patreon page to find out if you want to know what's going on with me. But I did go to do a Celtic invasion of the whiskey of Scotland, and that was an absolutely amazing trip. I'm going to talk about that on a future episode of this podcast. But in the meantime, I had some other things I wanted to share with you. I mentioned the blogs. Well, I'm also finally came up with an idea on how to share blogs on social and Patreon. I don't know. I've had a long conflicted history of how to post media on social media. I don't like social media in general, but it complicates things when there's multiple places you could end up posting stuff. And finally, I made a decision, which was that I'm going to start posting photos on Tuesdays on Facebook. So Tuesdays, you can get new photos from some of my trips and things that I'm doing. That's the plan. Now, what finally struck me was that Facebook sucks for reach. I think, the last post I did, 20 people saw it. It's just so bad. And I don't care. I mean, ultimately, that's what Patreon is for. And that's what I wanted to point you to, is if you head on over to Patreon, I am posting my blogs for free over on Patreon. So you just need to follow my Patreon page. It's quite simple. Just follow the Patreon page and you will get updates every Tuesday. Plus, you're going to get even more pictures than you'd get on Facebook, because there I'm only sharing 10 because I'm also cross-posting it to Instagram. And so only 10 photos go up there. But on Patreon, you'll get so much more. So go follow my Patreon page, whether you want to support me financially or not. It's what I'm trying to say. I don't know if you've noticed, but there are now advertisements on my podcast. Libsyn that's my website host. They have a special service for allowing small but a little bit larger podcasts to get some advertising revenue. So I have decided to post those on this podcast, and so far it's been well worth it. So I hope it's not too disruptive. I put them at the end of the podcast just because I'm a nice guy and don't want to disrupt you too much. I like keeping things on topic. What can I say? But honestly, I kind of enjoy listening to some of the ads. It's one of those things that for years, one of the things I liked about the old Facebook is you come across some random stuff. And yes, these are people that are advertising, but nevertheless, it still feels kind of random and like, oh. And sometimes it's locally related, which is really cool. So I don't know. Check it out. You'll find some ads at the end of this episode. Probably, I should say. You never know what happens in the future. What's your favorite track on Dancing with Hobbits? I released a brand new album in September. It is called Dancing with Hobbits. It is an album of instrumental Hobbit dance tunes. I recorded it with Sam Galogly. They provided the fiddle. I provide the auto harp. And I think it's a beautiful album. I think there's 10 tracks. They are bouncy, fun, instrumental, happy, beautiful music. And you can now own the album, whether it's the physical CD or, yes, you can say you have CDs, or if it's the album pin, and yes, you can say, you have album pins? Again, if you don't know what an album pin is, it is an enamel pin that is themed to a particular CD. So you get a digital download of the album, and then you can wear your album on your sleeve or do whatever you want with it. The latest one says, I went dancing with Hobbits, which I think is just fun. It nice hearkening back to those days with, I went to New Orleans and all I got with this was this lousy shirt. It just makes me happy. But go pick up a copy of that CD or album pin or support that album in any way you can. I would really appreciate it. And speaking of supporting stuff, I am getting ready to launch a Kickstarter for another Faire to Remember. Yes, that's the title, not the track. It is actually inspired by the Brobdingnagian Bards album, A Faire to Remember, and this Bards album is another Faire to Remember. The first one contained the top 10 most popular Renaissance Festival songs that we heard, of course. And then it features 7 tracks that are just fun things that we found along the way. I think it might have been 1 or 2 that we wrote. I'm drawing a blank right now. But another Faire to Remember is sort of continuing that same tradition. We're going to share some songs that are popular at Renaissance festivals, but it's going to have a lot more songwriting as well. There are several new tracks that we're extremely excited about. 2 of my favorites are Love Song to Alcohol, and the other one is Mushrooms. These 2 tracks we wrote over the past couple of years, and they have received an incredible amount of support. But when I was thinking about this album, I'm designing it not so much just to release an album. My goal is to basically make an album as impactful as A Faire to Remember. A Faire to Remember was still one of our most popular albums, and it's because it is number 1 for the Renaissance Festival community, and that's what this album is as well. It's for the Ren Fair community. In fact, I'm actually putting together a songbook for this one, and this is the first songbook I'm putting together that's actually going to have chords listed for the songs as well, so that you can play along. I don't think there'll be any notes, sheet music, because that's not my strong suit. I might be able to get Andrew to pull that off, but I don't know. He's pretty busy now that he's full time on the road. Oh my gosh, you should check out the Brobdingnagian Bards podcast if you get a chance, because Andrew's had his own whirlwind summer. You can listen to it on the podcast. Go to bardbootlegs.com or thebards.net and do that. One final request is please go vote if you get this. I voted for Harris, and I highly encourage you to do the same. I think she's going to be the best thing certainly for the rights of women, including my daughters. So I would greatly appreciate that. But she also has a great economic plan. But no matter who you vote for, go vote. All right, let's play some music from Ruth Keggin and Rachel Hare. They have an album called LOSSAN, and I did an interview with them on my Celtic Invasion of the Isle of Man, and it was just amazing. I'm hoping to get that on the podcast in the future. In the meantime, this is a track called Arraneyn Cadlee, I think. And when I come back, we'll talk about things to do on the Isle of Man.
Be the host Marianu Veen, Fabanbek Maki, Tauma Voga Tauma Eden, be the host, Fabangau the Shanshi.
So if you didn't know, I have another podcast called Travel Ireland and Scotland. It was formerly Kilt Father and other names in the past. And I was thinking about doing a long recap of my Celtic invasion of the Isle of Man, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull that off. So I might just leave it here, as this is one of the things that we got. There is an itinerary that we used for my Celtic invasion of the Isle of Man, and you'll find a link to that in the show notes. But today I'm going to talk about the 7 things you can do on the Isle of Man, and you can find out if there's enough to do in a week. So, spoiler alert, yes, there's plenty to do on the Isle of Man. Isle of Man is a really small island, and so when I was going there, I was really uncertain what to expect. I didn't, to cross the island, it takes like 15 to 20 minutes. It looks like it's going to take, an hour. And you start driving from Douglas, where you'll probably be arriving by airplane, and then you drive to Peel, and it takes 15 minutes, and you're like, what? I sneezed. Wait, it's too fast. I think it takes a more time to drive from one side of the Dingle Peninsula to the other side. I mean, it's crazy. So, yes, there's plenty to do there. In fact, I would say you could probably do far more than a week. We left a lot of things undone, and I wish we could have done more. So let's get on with the 17 things that you can do. First off, there is an electric rail. The electric rail runs all over the south side of the island, and just all the way up from one end to the other, pretty much. And it's kind of fantastic. It's a lovely rail ride. Takes you about an hour or so. You can ride it to item number 2 on the list, Snaefell Mountain, but it's just absolutely lovely, and you can stop off along the way and stop in Laxey or wherever. It is just lovely. Now, Snaefell Mountain is the one big mountain that exists on the island. It is said that you can see the 7 nations from the top of the mountain on a clear day. So you can see Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, and then I think it's the Kingdom of the Sea and the Kingdom of the Sky is how they break it down. Now, when we went, it was all cloudy and foggy and with a little drips of rain, but it was still a beautiful experience just going up to the top of the mountain. There's a little cafe up there. You can get some food and relax, drink some coffee, and then walk out, whether it's cloudy or not, and enjoy the wonderful atmosphere. It's a lot cooler up there as well. Number 3 is the Laxey Wheel. That is on the rail trip, and the Laxey Wheel, also named the Lady Isabella. The wheel pumped water from the mines and is now a great tourist guide thing that you can do, because you can go climb up to the top of the wheel. It's a little bit, it's beautiful, but it's a little unnerving. Sometimes you get on the top and you're looking down like, whoa, I'm going to fall. But there's also some trails out there. If you are into hiking, you can go hike some of the trails that go to the mines and such. It's definitely something you should consider doing if you visit the Isle of Man. Boat trip around the island or somewhere. There's several boat trips that you can take. We took a boat trip around the Calf of Man, which is an island that there are no one living on there. It's a nature preserve, and it was stunning. You can get off onto the island with special permission, and we did that for a brief stay. It was spectacular. Music at Black Dog Oven. So I didn't know where to eat and what to do. We were in Peel and ended up stopping off. Oh, let's go to Black Dog Oven. Turns out that is the place where there's live music. You can enjoy it many nights, at least on the weekends. But even better, oh my gosh, fantastic beer, some cocktails and mixed drinks, and then it's a pizza place. Usually I try to stick with local cuisine and such, less pizza-y type things. But God, that was good. And they not only had that, but they have these things called queenies. Queenies are like small scallops, I guess, that you put on top of they put on top of one of their pizzas. It was just delicious and fantastic. Number 6, get a tour guide. We had Jill Quirk, who did our tour with us. There is a whole website with a list of tour guides for the Isle of Man, people who know history, culture, legends. Jill knew a lot about the history of the Isle of Man in particular, and knew about there's a lot of legal systems. She wasn't a native of the island, but was currently living at the island, rather. But she did not grow up there, and so she was learning all about how the government works, and it's a very fascinating government. I cannot explain it, but I'm hoping I can share a podcast that will have a little bit more detail about that. So stay tuned for that. It might end up on that Travel Ireland and Scotland podcast. Ironic, considering this isn't Ireland or Scotland, but whatever. Culture Vannin is the number 7 item on my list. Culture Vannin is Manx cultural organization that is located right across the street from Tynwald Hill, and that is where the political system of the government of the Isle of Man is run. It's a big thing. Each and every year they vote on the latest laws that they're going to add. It's quite adorable, the whole experience. But the visitor center for Culture Vannin was really cool. I really enjoyed learning a lot about that. And he had some great people, including Ruth Keggin. She does a language, teaches the Manx language over there. So great place to visit. Number 8, Finottery Distillery. This is located in Ramsey, up on the east coast, northeast coast of the Isle of Man. It's currently a gin distillery. They also have vodka, but I think they're delving into regular whiskey as well. But rum, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. But their gin is just fantastic. They were really generous. We went in there, and there's a bar in there, and you can try out the different types of gin that they have. And we went through the list, and it was just, oh my gosh, so much goodness. Peel Castle is located in Peel. It is a ruined castle. It's on the west coast, and it's got a great view of the ocean and overlooks the Peel town itself. It is fairly large. There's a great history of a black dog that a story, a legend that you want to check into as well. But it's just a wonderful little place to walk around and experience a piece of the culture, and that was like the first place we went on our trip. Now on the other side of the island, there's Castle Roisin, and that is located in the town of Castletown. And that too, that one is a little bit better kept, I guess, but it's still it's a more fortified too. You can see why it still exists, I think. But I think they've done a lot more to keep up with it, and it's worth checking out over in Castletown. Nyarbil, I forget that's how that's pronounced, but if I pronounce that right, but this is located south of Peel, and it's a spot where they filmed the cottages from the movie Waking Ned Devine. It's also the place where there's a split in the geographic land. So you can put your feet on, or hands on, two different continental divides. So it's just one of those cool places, and it's just really pretty. It looks like a good place. It was a good place to go looking into the tide pools and such. I would love to have done more of that as well. Balladul Viking Boat is located just outside of Castletown, and it is basically just a field with some, rubble. They did actually outline where an old Viking boat was found, but there's different spots along this. It's a very lovely spot to see the countryside, a very lovely spot to dive into a little bit of Viking history, because Vikings are just as important as the Celts, if not more so, when it comes to the culture and history of the Isle of Man, which is one of the things I learned on this trip. Craignish Folk Village is located on the southern end of the island, and that's a delightful place. You can see what it was like living on the Isle of Man before modern times. There's a lot of old buildings there. You have some people that do little displays and get into character and whatnot. There's a lot of the sheep out there. The Manx Lochtin is what they're called, and it's a rare breed that is native to the Isle of Man. And if you like cats, they have that. And a little cafe, the cutest cafe, because it's in one of these old buildings and such. I just found it just delightful. It was a great walk around to explore. The Mael Circle, also in the southwest corner of the island, is it's another one of those that you walk out into a field and you get lost out there, and then all of a sudden there's a circle. It's one you have to find on Google Maps, and it's just it has some spectacular views, and you can get a little bit more idea of their stone circles in that area. Number 15, we have the Douglas Manx Museum. If you want to dive deep into the history and culture of the Isle of Man, then the Douglas Manx Museum is in their capital, Douglas. It is packed full of some wonderful displays. You learn a lot about the history. They break it down from all the tribes and groups of people who have lived there over the centuries, and it is a fascinating place to visit. They have a nice gift shop as well. I always like finding cool gift shops, and that definitely had one. Number 16, weekly folk sessions. There are weekly folk sessions throughout the island, mostly in Douglas, but also in Peel, and I think a couple other places they pop up as well. You can find, if you go to Facebook, you'll find places where they meet up. It is fairly sporadic, meeting up a little bit more during the summer times, the warmer months, but you will find them all the time, at least once a month throughout the year. So check it out. And the number 17 item, which admittedly we didn't get to do, was the Manx Cat Cafe. The Manx Cat is, of course, a tailless cat that originated from the Isle of Man with a mutation. So it has a very short tail. And they have a cafe where you can go visit and pet the cats and get to love on them. I did not get to go, sadly. I really wanted to do that. And I actually I think we did see one Manx cat on the trip, but only one, which was a little bit disappointing. But so if you really want to catch the Manx cats, go to the Manx Cat Cafe. So that's the 17 items that I picked. But there was still a lot more to do. There are some wallabies apparently on the island. I didn't get to see them. They're located in a certain part of the island. They were introduced into the island and flourished. So, which is just crazy. But of course, you'll find seals and dolphins and whales that you can see if you're out in the ocean area. There's so much to see. I highly recommend it. And if you like good food, Black Dog Oven, the Boatyard, and 14 North I can recommend all of those. They were just spectacular. So go check them out. All right, feedback. Mary Deal emailed photos from Central Coast, Ren Fair, and said, St. Louis Obispa, California, been here all day, loving every minute. Wish you and some of your folks were playing. We need some good music. Well, thank you so much, Mary. This show is brought to you by patrons on Patreon. So if you enjoy this podcast or my music, please join the club. You get something new every week. It could be bonus podcasts, downloadable songs, printed sheet music, blogs, stories from the road. Plus, you'll get access to videos like my Coffee with the Kilt Father video series. And you can now get downloadable albums. There's a lot of stuff you'll get. Send an email to follow@kiltfather.net for details. And of course, if you can't support me financially, you can sign up on Patreon for free and check out my blog each and every week. And if you want to join me on a Celtic Invasion vacation, just like we did to the Isle of Man in 2025, we're going to Galicia in Spain, which is another fascinating Celtic nation you might not have heard of. And I'll tell you about it in the future. And on the Irish and Celtic Music Podcast, head on over there as well. All right, we are almost about done. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please tell a friend, share it with a friend. And in the meantime, we're going to finish up with a track from my album, Dancing with Hobbits. This is Big Feet, Big Heart. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful time. And I will be back with more episodes of this podcast in the near future. So here is Dancing with Hobbits. Thanks for listening to Pub Songs and Stories. This episode was edited by Mitchell Peterson. You can follow and listen to the show on my Patreon or wherever you find podcasts. Sign up to my mailing list to learn more about songs featured in this podcast and discover where I'm performing. Remember, reduce, reuse, recycle, and think about how you can make a positive impact on your environment. Have fun and sing along at pubsong.com.